Hello again, everyone. It's been a bit of a layoff here. I think it's been about 3 weeks, maybe even a month since my last YouTube video. A lot has been going on in my life. I don't know if you know, but back on July 1st, I started up again taking college classes, and I have a whole nother couple YouTube videos to do on that subject at a later date, but that's been taking up some of my time. I also got more hours at my job, so that's been taking up some of my time. So yeah, I'm just trying to do the best I can with, juggling things around. Like probably you're trying to juggle a lot of balls in your life, so to speak. Anyway, this video, I'm going to continue to take another chunk of this elephant. This elephant being the 2019 North Carolina GOP State Convention. Okay, this is going to be the Saturday morning session. So let me go ahead and go to my notes here, and I'm so thankful that this convention happened, like 10 weeks ago, okay? And I don't know how in the world, but boy, do I take good notes. I have to say that. Don't mean to sound arrogant, but hey, it's the truth. I take very good notes. And I try to present them to you, the viewer or the listener of this YouTube experience. Okay, so here we go. Call to order was at 8:49 a.m. Scheduled start was 8:45, so not too bad of a delay. First, we had a 90-minute seminar on election law training done by a good friend of mine, Alex Dale of Pender County, which is down the Wilmington area of North Carolina. Alex was the chair of the New Hanover County Republican Party from 2009 to 2011. I got involved right in the spring of 2010. So that last year or so, that's how I got to know Alex, and he's a great guy. Married, I think he has 3 kids. He's a fairly young guy too. He's probably, I'm 33. If he's more than 10 years older than me, I'd be very surprised. I'd put it that way. He served on the recount team for the state senator Mike Lee. Okay, this was a very close race. Mike Lee was down 36 votes at the close of election day. Unfortunately, even though there was a recount, Mike Lee lost. He was the incumbent in this race, and he was also a Republican. This race was against Democrat Harper Peterson. Okay, Harper Peterson's a former mayor of Wilmington, so that right there will. Peterson was a very good candidate, and of course this was 2018 was a year where the Republicans had faced a stiff headwind. Also, please note that unfortunately the Republican legislature and then Republican Governor Pat McCrory took away film incentives, and that has really had a pretty rotten effect on Wilmington, especially the local economy down there. And when you take away an industry that creates jobs, okay, when you do that from a Wilmington is about 200,000 people, so it's not a town, it's a city, but still the economy down there is very tourist based. So when you take away the film industry, good paying jobs, from an economy that relies mostly on tourism, low paying restaurant, hotel, what have you, that's not going to sit well with the majority of voters. Any voters, Democrat or Republican. So that's ultimately why Mike Lee lost this race. He did the best he could to try to be pro-film, but when your political party, dismantles an industry, it's a little hard. This was a guilt by association kind of a thing. Okay, so also Alex Dale served on the Mark Harris legal team. That was a mess down there in District 9, which is the district that goes from the East Charlotte suburbs over to just a little bit past Fayetteville, over into Bladen County, Elizabethtown area. Of course, Mark Harris was the nominee, okay, in 2018, won by like 900 votes, but there's so much accusations of fraud and all this other mischievous stuff that ultimately the State Board of Elections ordered a new election. There's a primary. The nominees are going to be Dan Bishop, Republican, former state senator, against Dan McCready, the Democrat, who also ran as a Democratic candidate in 2018. Okay. So Alex Dale proceeded on his election law training, talked about types of ballots, polling place terminology. On election day, you have a lot of different workers. You have your runners. Those are people that just kind of go from poll to poll. They, a lot of times, make sure that the precinct chairs are doing okay. I know in 2012, when I worked, it was a very rainy, cold day. It was like 47 degrees. They brought me a nice hot chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A. One of these runners for the party. So that was a good thing. Your poll observers, those are people actually working inside, okay, and they are actually they're not party people. They are people that are hired by the Board of Elections, okay, and they're supposed to be non-partisan poll observers. Judges, you get this is the judges. How that happens is, right now we have a Democratic governor, so Governor the Cooper Pooper gets 2 judges for each county. No, for each precinct, excuse me. Okay, the Republicans get 1 for each precinct. Okay, talked about ballot harvesting. This is actually legal in California, but it's illegal in North Carolina. Ballot harvesting, there was accusations of this in the Mark Harris race. Ballot harvesting is taking someone else's ballot to the county board of elections. Okay, so let's say I have my neighbor across the street, Susie Q, or whatever her name is. Susie Q gives me a completed ballot. She says, "Hey, can you do me a favor and drop this off to the Board of Elections?" No, don't do that. That's illegal, okay? Election operations, let's see. A lot of the elections operations stuff is review, because I've gone to many different seminars as a precinct chair to make sure that things are running as smoothly as possible in my precinct. There are probably around 2,000 voters or so in my precinct, okay? That may seem small, but there was a race for the state legislature, state house seat. Trudy Wade, a great conservative Republican lady, veterinarian too, so not your typical lawyer politician, which is a nice thing. Unfortunately, she lost her re-election bid in 2018 by about 700 votes, okay? So my precinct, 2,000 votes, yeah, that may seem like a small number, but when somebody loses by 700 votes, your precinct can be very consequential, okay? Alright, now after the election law training, which, unfortunately, the audience got very restless, and the last half hour or so, people were just being very disrespectful and having their own conversations and everything. It was just, look, election law training, 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning is not the most exciting thing in the world to cover, but people should just please try to be respectful, alright? Okay. Next on the agenda, we heard from State Treasurer Dale Folwell. This is a guy who there are good Republicans and there are bad Republicans. Okay, Dale Folwell is definitely a good guy. He's somebody who I kind of sort of look up to because he comes from humble beginnings. He worked a lot of odd jobs, and then finally, I think in his mid late 20s or so, he got his CPA license. And now look, he was a state legislature for a little while there. When he was in his mid 40s to about his mid 50s. Okay, now at the age, I think he's about 61 now. He's a state treasurer. I hope he's going to be running for re-election. And he's definitely a public servant, a very good public servant who is serving the people and not the lobbyist and not the corporatist or the statist in Raleigh. Okay, Dale Folwell, he led off his talk by saying people don't care what party you're from, they only want their problems fixed. Look, did you know, okay, the state health plan, which the state treasurer is in charge of, the state health plan here in North Carolina is 9 times. Talking about Ferris Bueller in his absences. The state health plan is 9 times the size of the state budget. Okay. This state health plan is a risky scheme. 20% of people's income is going to something they don't understand. Healthcare. Mr. Folwell says we need more transparency and we have to push the cost information out to the consumer. I agree. This creates competition which lowers cost. Basic economic principle there. Then Folwell says, and I quote, since I got elected in 2016, I have been reeling in unfunded pension and healthcare liabilities. 30 billion with a B in unfunded pension and healthcare liabilities. Now, how did it get this bad? Well, for 40 years, about 32 of those years was the government under mostly Democratic control. For 40 years, no money has been set aside to pay for the state retiree plan. Can you imagine? With the baby boomer generation coming up, with North Carolina being a Sun Belt state and all this migration from Northeast down to North Carolina, which North Carolina is like a top 5 state for retirees in the country. Yeah, for 40 years, no money has been set aside for state retiree plans. It's just crazy. Okay, so every year there is a $300 million with an M, $300 million transfer from the state health plan to the state budget. And this $300 million, it's the state health plan. It's like it's like what you're supposed to pay and what you are charged. There's a difference. It's sort of like you're going to the grocery store and there are no prices on the shelf and you buy whatever you need, but then 2 months later you get a bill. Surprise, surprise, and it's a lot more expensive than you thought it was. Okay. And then he threw out a figure, $3 billion. I don't know if that's another number, but Mr. Folwell said, I have the responsibility to know what you're going to pay, and he's been for clear pricing, okay, which is a very good thing. Also, President Trump's been for clear pricing as well. The customer and the payer are side by side. Are side by side when you talk about normal consumerism, like what the price of gas is, what the price of Pepsi is at Food Line versus Harris Teeter. But in healthcare, the customer and the payer are far apart, and Mr. Folwell wants to close the gap so the customer and the payer know what's going on. Let's see. But this surprise billing, a lot of people, unfortunately, they don't realize that where they're going for their medical care is out of network. In other words, they're going to places or doctors that are not covered by their insurance policy. And what that means is people are getting surprise medical bills, and unfortunately, a lot of people are declaring bankruptcy. By the way, there was a great column in the Winston-Salem Journal by our good buddy A.J. Dowd a couple weeks ago, talking all about this people having to declare bankruptcy because the hospitals don't want to declare pricing. But A.J. Dowd is trying to lobby the state legislature to put in a law that tells the hospitals you must go to clear pricing. And we want to salute A.J. Dowd. He is definitely a great person, and one of the great statesmen here in the NCGOP. Okay, but also Vermont, they lost their AAA bond rating because of unfunded pension liabilities, and that might happen here in North Carolina. That would not be a good thing. Warren Buffett, by the way, the billionaire, okay, says, guess what? Companies look at a state's bond rating to determine where they want to locate a company for jobs, okay? And North Carolina, there are 900,000 public service workers. And Dale Folwell says, look, I'm trying to make a difference for them. I don't want to make a difference for myself. Dale Folwell was a great, great man. Very humble, very honest and transparent. Just everything you would want in a I hate calling him a politician, but everything you'd want in a politician. If we had in Washington D.C., if we had 65 Dale Folwells in the Senate and 300 Dale Folwells in the House, boy, we'd be really, Trump's doing a very good job, but we'd be doing a lot better job if we had more Dale Folwells in Congress. Okay, next up is the Superintendent Mark Johnson. Okay, he is doing good things at the Department of Education. He, in 2016, was the first ever Superintendent of Education elected in North Carolina. He is replacing testing with financial literacy. He's also proposing a course to teach family principles. He says, vote for Mark and Mark it done. Classic campaign slogan there. And he says, look, we're trying to really push home the message that you don't have to get a 4-year degree to be successful. They're really trying to push community college and the armed forces as options for high schoolers to have a good quality of life and get a good job. School choice to families is also something he's working on. And also, over the last 3 years, the Department of Education has increased funding while cutting taxes at the same time. He's also proposed a law to allow schools to opt out of Common Core math. Then, on the agenda, we have Congresswoman Virginia Foxx, okay, out of the 5th District. That is basically Winston-Salem, North and West, okay. That's your Yadkin County, your Allegheny County, your Mount Airy, and so forth. And she says, a very good quote here, when the Lord gives you responsibility, you have to work hard. Former congressman who's now passed away about 4 or 5 years ago, Howard Coble, formerly of the 6th District, which is east of Greensboro, west of Durham, north and east of Asheboro. Howard Coble said Virginia Foxx is a feisty mountain woman from the Blue Ridge who goes bear hunting with a switch. Then Mrs. Foxx said the words healthcare and education, are not in the Constitution. And she also says there are a lot of other things the government is doing that are not his responsibility. Okay. And also, did you know states now have the option to get rid of Common Core? Obama, he forced the Common Core mandate on the states, but fortunately the GOP House repealed it. And she wanted to inform everybody that in 2020, the Republicans need to win 18 seats to get back the majority in House Representatives. And that is assuming that they hold District 3 and District 9 here in North Carolina. Those two districts are going to be undergoing a election on September 10th. District 9 we already talked about. District 3 is going to be undergoing a special election due to the death of Walter Jones. District 3 is basically coastal North Carolina, all the way from Corolla, all the way down to just between Jacksonville and Wilmington, that whole big area. Okay, so personal note now. At this time of the convention, it's around 10:30, and I'm thinking, oh good, we're finally going to get a credentials report and go back into business session in maybe about 10 minutes or so. But convention chairman Billy Miller kept calling up different speakers that were not on the agenda, and he did not explain why until later on. Okay, so next speaker is Jefferson Griffin, who's running for the state judiciary next year. I've talked about him in a lot of other videos, so I'm not really going to discuss him at length here, but I do want to send my thoughts and prayers to him and his family, because Mr. Griffin is actually right now, he's with the National Guard, and he's on deployment right now in the Middle East. So definitely keep him in your prayers. Next candidate is Fred Gore, running for the state judiciary. He's the current district court judge of Bladen, Brunswick, and Columbus County, down the southeast part of the state. He has 27 years of military experience. He's a former prosecutor, and he has this unique view on the separation of church and state. He says, when I've sentenced defendants to life in prison, they soon find God and start attending church every day. Therefore, I bring God with me every day to the courtroom. And for that, I want to salute Mr. Gore, by the way, because we need to bring God with us, not only to the courtroom, but everywhere we go, really. Next, we have the Award of Service to Mr. Dallas Woodhouse. Dallas Woodhouse has served as the executive director of the NCGOP since October 2015, and in that time, the voter rolls, here in North Carolina, the Republicans have gained 50,000 voters, but the Democrats have lost 150,000. So that is a net gain of 200,000 new voters for the GOP. But there's a little asterisk there I want to put in there. Unaffiliateds are really surging up. Just last year, the Republicans dropped from second place to third place. So you have now, you have Democrats number one still, but that's number two is unaffiliated, and that'll probably, within the next 5 years, unaffiliated will probably be ahead of Democrats, and then number three is Republicans. Okay, so now we have the National Committee Woman Report from Dr. Ada Fisher. She presents a gift of service to Robin Hayes. It's a little mini elephant sculpture. Robin Hayes, of course, is the outgoing chair. I've talked about him before. He got in some trouble back in April, and you can go to another video and listen to all that. Okay. National Committee Man Report from Representative Mark Brody, who represents Union County in the state legislature. He recently met with RNC Chair Roma McDaniel. She says everything is ready to go for the 2020 election, including data and organizational operations. Brody is trying to clean up the liberal corruption on the Commission on Presidential Debates and have the RNC and the DNC mutually agree to take over the Commission on Presidential Debates and have better and more fair moderators. Okay, he's also working on a resolution passed, on getting a resolution passed at the next RNC meeting in July in Charlotte. It's called "Stay Out of Our Primary" to ban out-of-state legislatures from influence the primary. And I don't know if this resolution passed. There was apparently an RNC meeting back in July in Charlotte. And these RNC meetings are open to the public, but they never announce what time or where they're going to be. It's one of those things you need to work on. Okay. Now it's 11:38 a.m. and we have a recess because credentials report is not in order. The funny thing here is that lunch is supposed to get started at 12. Okay, there's supposed to be a lunch break from 12 to 2 according to the convention agenda, but if you've been watching these convention videos, you know that the times can be tentative, not permanent. Okay. Now, what happened was at 12 p.m. sharp, Convention Chair Billy Miller, he issued the following statement. He said, and I quote, "Yesterday we had about a dozen people try to challenge the Credentials Committee and force a hearing. Only 2 were successful. Today we had 30 to 40 people try to challenge the Credentials Committee to force a hearing at 11:30 a.m. this morning. I came in and ruled this out of order. Then the Credentials Committee began their report. But seeing how it is now time to dismiss for lunch, and I am being told by the committee that there are 200 people trying to get through registration. If we don't open registration now, then we will not be able to register 200 people by 2 p.m. So in order to start the afternoon session on time, the chairman is invoking Rule 5 of the convention rules. Rule 5 states the convention shall reconvene at 8:45 a.m. on Saturday, June 8th, 2019, and then recess as determined by the Credentials Chair. Okay, so that right there, I'm going to leave y'all with a little bit of cliffhanger. That just goes to show you that the afternoon session is going to be chaos and very fun. And hopefully I'll have a video out on Saturday afternoon business session within the next 2 or 3 days or so. Okay. For now, though, I am the Conservative Pelican. Bye-bye.